in order to create an environment that is comfortable for people, we do need to listen to make sure we're getting them in the right places, in the right spots. If we have that spot, if we don't have it, then you have to be honest about that as well. Because ultimately, everybody suffers. If you put somebody in a spot that you don't have a good faith belief is a good fit for them, it won't be good for them. It won't be good for you. It won't be good for their training partners. It'll be a bad experience all around. And then the ripple effect of that will be unknown to you.
Welcome to the Second Plan A podcast, where we take hard-earned lessons from the mats and convert them into tools for navigating life's challenges. I'm Amber Hoover. I'd rather stick to the plan.
Do you not have that memorized by now?
No, I really don't. I don't know why. I need to see it every time.
I'm Ryan Hoover, and I don't know. Plans can change just from a look.
They sure can. So today we are moving on to our second Plan A. I'm a visual learner. We've talked about this, and I like to see it, and I will continue looking at it. But yeah, I've thought the same thing of myself, but no, I need to look at it. But I could probably do it if I had to without it. Okay.
We'll test that next time.
On this episode, we are uniting two prior topics by emphasizing how some of the, I did not change this. You know what? Who cares?
Third Plan A.
We are still going to bridge between communicating effectively and short, pithy sayings, but it's going to be a little different than what I thought it was going to be when I wrote this on this episode.
So third Plan
A. So many Plan A's. There's a pun in here too that I didn't get to. You know what? On this episode,
so just to give you an idea of how much she hates what's happening right now, is she doesn't like second and third Plan A's. I literally, that's how I exist. Like it is how I go through and navigate life. It's the bane of her existence. So the fact that whatever she had scripted here is not what she thought she had scripted here is toxic. It is caustic. It is eating her up from the inside out.
And I'll remember it for years to come.
Because I'll remind her.
No, you're going to forget in literally 5 minutes. Well, I had this, the bridge between communicating effectively and short, pithy sayings might indeed be one to burn. Are you ready to cross it?
Well, not if you're burning it.
No, I know. I'll let you finish crossing it before we burn it. Okay. I don't know what we're going to talk about today. It's clearly morphed a few times. It went from literally just fight myths and good intentioned lies all the way to communication skills again. And I landed in on active listening. And so that's
what? Active listening.
Huh?
So what are we talking about?
I'm going to start talking and we're going to find out at the end and then we're going to redo
you haven't
the intro.
Been talking?
Danny Meyer. Do you know who Danny Meyer is? You do. I can see it. You just don't know how you know.
Keep talking.
A renowned New York City restaurateur.
Yep. Got it.
I can't read that word.
Restaurateur,
but it doesn't have the, never mind, is sitting in one of his restaurants, deep in conversation with author Daniel Coyle, when a waiter drops a tray of water glasses. What happens next is documented in Coyle's book, The Culture Code. Meyer raises a finger to pause the conversation as he watches the waiter who dropped the glasses start picking up the pieces, and another waiter arrives with a broom and dustpan to help. Once they're done cleaning and Meyer returns his focus to the conversation, Coyle asks why he was watching so closely. And he responds, "I'm looking for what happens right afterward. And I'm looking for their energy level to go up." He goes on to explain that energy level should be going up when employees connect and support each other. It doesn't necessarily have to do with the task itself. So similar to how like an ant colony and beehive function, all these tasks add to the group. They all connect. And so if energy is going down after those types of interactions, that connection is fraught with maybe anger or at the person, or there's disinterest that just comes from, just doing my job, another thing to do. And so he was using that time in that incident to gauge how things were amongst his employees. And for Meyer, an energy drop in that type of interaction points to a larger problem, because the way he operates his restaurants, their number one job is to take care of each other. Their colleagues come first in that setting, and then the guests and the community, and he has a whole hierarchy of how they operate. So I thought that was a really unique example of active listening in a way, a very third party kind of situation. But from that hospitality industry interaction, there's plenty of crossover to the mats and other forms as well. Reading energy from a group is a key part of active listening, especially when we look at what we do as a group coach.
Say things now.
Yeah. Yes, please.
So, all right. So I would be curious to see how he defines energy, because so my immediate thought, well, there's two things. The immediate thought is this heightened state of energy. I view that a little differently. It's almost like when somebody in a class gets injured, and all of a sudden there's this
buzz,
frantic energy, and it just draws attention,
other people in,
to that. I clearly that's not
what he means. Yeah,
that he is describing.
Well, it's funny because
I would like to understand more about the energy he's describing, because in my head, what I visualize is, okay, well, now we're making a bigger deal out of it. This waiter, waitress is already kind of embarrassed. They're already, trying to shrink in the environment so people don't pay attention to them. And then we don't want to draw additional attention to that. Unless we do. I mean, maybe we want to draw attention to the fact that coworkers are coming to help and be supportive and whatever. I don't know. I would like to hear more on his kind of thought process there.
Danny Meyer, happy to have you on as the first guest of the podcast. Yeah. So, tag him. I thought that was interesting because in that story, the author does mention everybody stops and looks, and then once it's cleaned up and moving on, everybody goes back to eating, which in our experience in restaurants and people dropping things, that's about what happens. It doesn't catch attention for too terribly long. People will probably watch and see, and if it's a loud crash, some of this kind of stuff, trying to see what's going on, and then you kind of go back to your thing. But that is an interesting connection to our time on the mats and injuries, and as the coach of the room, being able to, or we should be able to, redirect the energy and the focus and let one person go, take care of whatever it is.
They're very different contexts.
Yeah.
That's what comes to my mind in our world, because it drives me crazy when somebody gets, and it could be just super minor, and all of a sudden, like, there's 6 people standing around them, and literally that's the last thing anybody wants, know. And I know people are well intentioned, but no, they're already, because it's the same thing. They're embarrassed or whatever. They just want a minute, leave them alone. Like And as a coach, and we talk about this in coach courses, I want to make sure that somebody is handling them, taking care of it. But for the most part, I'm immediately looking to reframe and redirect and get everybody on track and back into training. The other thing that jumped out to me, and I'm reading way more into what you read about this than you said he does this.
Well, and I'm, the script said raises a finger to pause the conversation. So like if we're talking and then something happens and you keep trying to talk to me and I'm like, or what, I don't know, whatever. I've never, I don't think I've ever asked you to wait talking to me, but pretend like I would, because anyway, it made me think of the story of, have you ever heard of Disney fingers? No.
So, and
sorry, that was very judgmental.
If you work at one of the Disney parks, you can't use a single finger to, you can't give directions this way. You can't ask somebody to wait 1 second with a finger. Like it's deemed as kind of rude and a bit of an affront. So you have to, like, you literally use 2 fingers or more. So even if you're going to give directions, you want to give them
airplane exits,
this kind of direction, or give me 1 second kind of thing. Not that. I mean, it's just, again, we've talked about body language, and this is a listening on a physical level.
Yes.
With what's happening with somebody's hands and body language and whatever. And
that's what we're doing, is we're listening on a physical level.
That popped into my head when you were. I'm not judging Danny Meyer. I totally understand the context of what we're talking about. It's just those are the things that popped into my head when you're relaying this information.
It is interesting to me, though, because a lot of this section that I'm pulling from, active listening in general, talks about really paying attention to the person you're interacting with. And a lot of times we don't get that kind of focus. Honestly, with this podcast, this is probably the easiest time to really focus on a single speaker. And even still, there's an element of remembering what I want to say off of you and that sort of thing, because we aren't necessarily just having a one-on-one conversation. We're also engaging with an audience and attempting to follow a plan. I think I don't even know anymore.
That's how it started anyway.
Yeah, but
For you.
if for me, that's fair. If I'm talking to a parent in the gym and the kid's coming up and jumping and whatever and talking, or there's multiple things happening at once, nothing's really getting my full attention. And so the question is how to kindly to another, especially adult,
right,
be like, hang on one second.
Yep.
I understand what you're saying is important to me and I want to give you my full attention. I'm engaged in this thing first, though.
Right. But also, as an adult, you should understand that if I'm having a conversation with another person, you should freaking wait, and I shouldn't have to tell you that.
That's fair. That's fair.
Come on, man.
Yeah, that's fair. I do think it maybe it's because we're all just running around chickens with our heads cut off, that even if you aren't paying full attention to me, as long as you get the gist of it, maybe. I don't know. And obviously all of this is so circumstantial. It depends what's going on, what you're asking about. Does it really need your full attention? One of the studies I was looking at from the Harvard Business Review, I really enjoyed it. One of the first things in that article that they talked about was thinking about why you're listening. And that had multifacets to it, of course. But am I listening because I need to respond? Am I listening because they need to vent? Am I listening because I was just the closest person to them to talk about this? Like what's really going on? And once you have that framed in your mind, you can be a better listener once you know what's happening.
Yeah. And I mean, I do private lessons where I know I have certain people that they're going to talk more than we train. And some of them are talking just because they need to get some stuff said. They're not really looking for feedback or advice or for me to offer up anything.
Yeah.
Then some of them are actually looking for
help,
some
support,
sort of so yeah, I mean, I think it takes all types, and you have to figure out which one you are in that moment in time. Are you there just as a sounding board, or are you there as somebody that's listening in order to be able to give some sort of advice or opinion?
Yeah. So that brings up this idea of different learning styles. And I believe this was the same Harvard Business Review article as well about your listening style. And it lists 4 here. And one of the questions was asking what your default style was, which I feel like that's really difficult to answer. I think a lot of it's going to depend on your mood, where you are, who you're talking to, the environment. So I'm curious to see, one, if you feel like you have a default style, especially after I list them, or if you think it's just too dependent or you use all of them, that sort of thing. Yeah. So here are and this was specifically work through the healthcare field, which they used observations from to figure out these learning styles. The first one is a task-oriented listener. It's focused on efficiency, shapes a conversation around the transfer of important information. Second one is an analytical listener, aims to analyze a problem from a neutral starting point. The third is a relational listener, seeks to build connection and understand and respond to the emotions underlying a message. And the last one is a critical listener, typically judges both the content of the conversation and the speaker themselves.
I mean, I definitely have elements of all those.
Yes.
I'm probably a little bit more the second one, I think.
Analytical.
Kind of as a
neutral
default
starting point. Yeah.
Or maybe that's just me hoping that that's what I am. I don't know. But I definitely have elements of all those things. And, again, context matters. I probably, depending on the speaker, if there's a precedent with that speaker, I probably trend more towards one or another based on who it is.
Yeah. I feel like if I have a default, it's more the relational side where I am focusing more on the emotions and trying to relate and empathize first. And then just figure out what they want from me.
And there may be some gender things there too.
Yeah, I think so for sure, which is going to come up as well. So this was from an article about improving your listening. And so being able to have elements of all of those is important, and being able to shift even dynamically within a conversation between these is important. I read this article before realizing that the International Coaching Federation, have you heard of that before? I think it's about life coaching.
Good. Awesome.
I'm First off, I was like, how is there an international coaching federation? What does that mean? And then second off, I read and snooped through the website, and I still want to know what that means. Anyway,
I'm going to start the Galactical Coaching Federation.
Galactical, tactical, bring it back. One of the quotes I saw was that as coaches, the most difficult part of our role and the toughest habit to shake off when we begin our training is to listen to our clients and refrain from providing solutions. And I did hang on to that a little bit because there is, I think, especially as somebody in front of people on the mats, newer coaches jump at being able to give an answer. Yeah. And so it is a big learning curve for newer coaches to learn what the person is saying to me isn't necessarily what the actual issue is.
Right.
And so if you,
almost never
it is pretty much not. Yeah. So you can't just listen to what they're saying. We have to engage in all types, but we also have to understand the problems underlying what they're saying. Is this more of an emotional thing? Is this an actual physical problem? Like, if you think you understand, you probably don't. You should ask more questions.
Yeah. The number of people that have told me they can't do something because of X,
they're not flexible or they're whatever.
And I'm like, what? Show me. Like that's always my answer. Show me. And I would say 95% of the time, whatever they told me was crap. They may have actually believed it. You know, but it was crap. No, it has nothing to do with your flexibility or your mobility, or you're just not doing what I told you to do. You know, like that's literally not what I demonstrated. That's not what I said. That's not what I coached. Look around the room. Like, I got a 78-year-old over there doing it. Don't tell me it's because you're not flexible. Like, you're 14.
It's true. Although have you seen teens recently? Oh, it's rough. But so in terms
on that note, I'm going to give out a shout out to Travion and Kane. One, because I know Travion listens, and so these are two of my teens. If you follow me on social at all, that I posted about going to their graduation parties a couple of weeks ago. They've both been with us for a very long time, and you know, it's cool to. One of the things I think that has kept me doing this for as long as I have is the opportunity to see real growth and development. It's hard to see that in adults. You know, I mean, it happens. You do see it, like whether it's them getting more flexible or more mobile, or, you know, better shape, losing weight, you know, whatever. But you see real growth and development in kids and teens, and like, you actually feel like I may have made a difference there, you know? And so when these are two kids that, you know, have been around for a long time, and I've actually been able to spend a good bit of time with as kids, and then into almost adults. Almost adulthood. By their age, anyway. Travion is nowhere near an adult. I'll tell you a quick story. This was last year, I think, maybe year before. I can't remember. He's always talking junk, you know, always. He starts it always. I never started.
Sounds right.
And so he decided he was going to go work out with me one day. So I went to his house, picked him up. We went to my gym where I lift, and we did a lift. And his mom tells me, she sends me a message on Sunday or Monday. I can't remember. This was on a Friday. She sends me a message on Sunday or Monday, and said that Travion hadn't gotten out of bed all weekend.
I bet he was
because
dying.
He was so sore. And so at his graduation party 2 weekends ago, I think it was, he said, because he's out of school now, he's getting ready to start some summer classes where he's going to college. And he said, you should take me to work out again with you next week. You know, he said, I'm ready this time. I said, okay, well, message me. I heard nothing, not a word. So, Travion, where you at? Anyway, I know that was a big departure. And that's none to what we're talking about.
I was about to say, my tie-in is going to be very choppy here.
It doesn't need a tie-in.
Teenagers, though. It's funny because this is ubiquitous across all age groups. Across the Red Sea. This is ubiquitous across all age groups, where you're going to have somebody in your class tell you they can't do something. And short of because my doctor said I should not, you're likely lying.
And even then, I'm like, okay,
but why?
What information did your doctor have? Like, what did you tell your doctor? And what did you explain to your doctor that you would be doing? Like
communication, listening.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not gonna
same
get
coin.
into it.
Yeah, we can leave doctors for a whole other subject. But
yeah, I got things.
Essentially, in terms of suspending judgment, withholding a solution, especially for the first time coach who just wants to give an answer right off the bat, understanding that you probably don't, even if you're thinking of an answer in your head while they're talking,
right,
you still don't have all of the information to assuredly say, here's my solution for you. And so we want to start with more curiosity. Be curious, not judgmental. So in terms of ways to do that, last episode, we talked about using the Socratic method a little bit to help them find the answer on their own. And then, the next step would be giving them the principles and tools to implement to help them find the answer on their own, rather than you telling them, well, try this or well, do this, helping them connect the dots on their own.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, my natural coaching approach is just much more this way,
Yeah.
I feel like the thing that I always say is I try to give people, a skeleton and let them build the muscle, let them fill in the muscle, or I give them a framework and let them paint the picture. I think it's very difficult for people to have actual ownership of information, there to be real transfer of knowledge if it's you ask a question and I answer it.
Yeah.
I get that it can be frustrating if you ask a question and I ask you a question back. I get that. Or I ask you 3 questions back. I totally understand it. But it forces you. You reposted a video from a previous podcast about asking your parents how to spell something and them telling you to go look it up in the dictionary.
I'm like, yeah, that's where they're spelled they're organized by how you spell it. Right. I don't know how to spell it. Yeah.
Right. If they had just said, all right, this is how you spell it, you would have maybe memorized it, but you wouldn't understand simply by the process of having to find it in the dictionary, because you've got some general idea of how it's spelled. Yes. Probably. Yep. I mean, unless it's just something crazy.
I mean, there are silent K's everywhere, but that's okay.
That whole process, one, it goes back to the erector set and the Lego set and all these kinds of things that we've talked about, where what I want to create is people that are problem solvers, people that can see a problem and in real time come up with some sort of solution, instead of seeing a problem and immediately shutting down and thinking, well, I've never seen anything like this before. I can't handle it. I don't know what to do. They shut down, And in our world, where you're talking about violence, that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
That's just not an okay response. And so I think on every level that it's feasible and it makes sense, we should be encouraging people to be creative, to be problem solvers, to I just told you this, what was that, yesterday? I was like, I need for people to come to me with solutions, not problems.
Yes. One day.
One day. And it's not because I can't problem solve or I can't figure it out. I want other people to be able to do that as well,
Yeah.
And so I think when it comes to coaching, the easy thing for both sides is just to give an answer.
Yeah. Well, in the coach,
that's the easiest thing.
In the coach to student hierarchy, in the employee employer hierarchy, there's the other side of that, which is empowering your student I know. Making sure that the people who are around you feel comfortable coming up with a solution.
Yeah.
And then presenting it to you and knowing that they're not going to tell you and it gets shot down
but that's an actual example of actual empowering, like that.
The
real definition of it. That's actually what it means. I am literally giving you the power to do this.
Yes.
Yep. It's not, here's a 60-minute women's self-defense and empowerment seminar. Like, shut the fuck
because
up.
You did it. You have the power.
That's not a thing. Like, I can't empower you in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can give you some tools, maybe, but I have no influence over what you do with those tools and how you use them, if you ever use them, or
Right,
whatever.
right. Your thought
Um,
process related to what we just did.
Right.
That's going to be what
Right.
quote unquote empowers you.
If you just take the actual definition of what that word means, I have to have some sort of power that I can then impart to you, And
Right.
so if it's a work thing, I can say, look, I don't need you to come to me with this set of issues. I trust that you can handle these things. That is me empowering you to deal with these things.
Yeah.
I can go to an employee and be like, look, if it costs less than $250, I trust you to spend that money. Okay. If it costs more than that, then go to Amber. If it costs more than that, whatever that is, then she can come and ask me, but
Yeah.
I think that's what actual empowerment is. The way we use that word, I think, does a disservice to what we are actually able to give people.
So I hear your concern over how the word empower has been used, and you've done a really good job clarifying what that definition is.
You're getting ready to make me mad. I can tell.
I'm active listening.
Yeah.
I do want to use that to segue into these kind of three aspects of active listening, which is cognitive, emotional, and behavioral.
Okay.
And so, in terms of becoming a better listener, understanding that all of these are a part of your conversations. And there's the cognitive side, the information that you were saying, explicit and implicit. Mm-hmm. So the definition you gave me, mm-hmm. but also the fervor of which you delivered it. Mm-hmm. The no Disney fingers. The emotional side. This definition doesn't track. Staying calm and compassionate. Well, I guess I was staying calm and compassionate during the conversation, but also trying to meet you where you're at, because I know how empowerment, that language, that term goes in our space. And then behavioral, which I maybe didn't do a great job of and should look to improve, conveying interest and comprehension verbally and non-verbally. You did not appreciate the way I conveyed my comprehension verbally. So we'll work on that. Non-verbally, though, I'm here for you. And not that you get a chance to experience the non-verbal without the verbal very much. That's why we have a podcast. How do you feel about this breakdown of cognitive, emotional, and behavioral parts of active listening?
I think it's fine.
That was our look at active listening. So I scoured the internet over like Forbes and Medium and Harvard Business Review and a bunch of psychology articles and different things like that on active listening. And I didn't find any uniform like components, like this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, that everybody just agreed in terms of the terminology, but they were all saying about the same things, which were essentially paying attention. So limiting the external distractions like phones, but also internal distractions, not letting your mind wander, focusing on the speaker, verbal and nonverbal cues. And then there was also the suspending judgment side, which is a lot of what we deal with, especially as a coach, not jumping straight into problem-solving mode, but being able to listen and understand and ask more questions, which is the third one, listening to understand rather than to respond, asking those open-ended questions, being curious, not judgmental. Another one was reflecting, matching the speaker's communication, pace, and tone, and meeting them where they're at, which is really difficult sometimes when you're tired and just going about your day and somebody comes up to you excited to tell you about something and you're like, cool, love that for you. And then some type of clarifying, paraphrasing, summarization of whatever they told you, which again, like all of this in terms of it depends, not the way you want to be active listened to. What's the
active heard?
Active heard.
Actively heard.
Actively heard. I'm so changing the name of this podcast now. But yeah, that's about what they boiled down into, which is what you're thinking about, what they're feeling about it, and then their outward behavior and movements.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think so much of this just is driven by context.
Yeah.
Driven by the relationship you have with this person. If there is one, if there's a precedent there for these types of conversations with this person, I mean, there are plenty of people that come to me and start to ask me a question. I'm like, nope.
And you have that relationship.
Yep. Absolutely.
To actively
Nope.
deny listening.
Nope. And there are plenty of people that I know are going to start a conversation with me, and there's going to be a question there somewhere, but the amount of time that it's going to take them to get to it, like it's going to be, and in those cases, you have a choice to make, right? You either have to really listen and pay attention, like, because there's going to be something of value in there, but man, it's going to take a while to get to it. Or you do the opposite and you just let them say whatever they're going to say. You nod every now and then, kind of, this kind of stuff. And then you're at the end, assuming that end comes, you hit them with,
what's your actual question?
So what can I help you with?
Okay.
I mean, if it's you,
if it's me, what's your actual question?
Yes, 100%.
You do let me ramble. You have a particular look that you give me, and then I choose whether I'm just still going to keep going, or if I'm going to...
It's usually that one.
It's usually that one. Or I'm going to stop and let you ask me what the actual question is. Or sometimes I jump straight to, okay, so the actual question is, yeah.
Because over time, you have learned to see these patterns in yourself, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have been empowered to find... No, yeah, I have started to realize that. Boy, are you a great reflector.
No, but I mean, it's a perfect example of context matters.
Yeah.
I know that. I mean, you even do it in text. Like you'll send me text, and I'm like, what are you asking me? What am I supposed to do with this information?
This is 90% of our interactions.
I'm listening, but I'm not sure what you're saying.
Oh, communication, man. All right, I don't know where we are. I know where we started. I know where we were planning to go, but I want to pull this into the front desk world for specifically gyms, what we can speak to. But I imagine this goes across any industry where you have somebody welcoming people in and you're trying to bring them into a community, a fold. Right. And it's really important to understand that what somebody is saying to you is not the whole story. And you don't necessarily understand what they need just because of how they're approaching you and what they're saying. Yeah. And so being curious, asking more questions, being truly interested in what their goals are, what they have to say, what brought them here, what their interests lie, that sort of thing is going to help you get to what the actual thing is. And that's where this structure of paying attention, holding off on the solution, trying to understand them, reflecting them, clarifying can get you to a better place in terms of actually helping them.
I think it's important for somebody in that role. It's a fine line because you have to talk enough to get them talking.
Yeah.
But they should do most of the talking.
Yeah.
You're going to have to understand how to prompt them to get them to where they need to go. Because a lot of times, in our world, at least, people that walk through the doors, they don't really know what they want.
No.
They're not really sure. They might have a very vague idea of their goals, and they may think they know what class or program or whatever is going to help them reach that. But I would say a majority are either misinformed, misaligned, they want a thing, they don't know what that thing is, and they don't know how to get it,
Yeah.
And so,
which is great. I mean, that's what we're here for.
Right. But to do it right,
yeah.
You can't. It drives me crazy to hear somebody working in a role like that and to hear them doing 80% of the talking. I want to be like, yo, shut up. I really need to be able to pull information from them because unless I don't really want to direct the conversation to put them in a place that I want to put them in a place,
Right.
Now
that's listening to,
yes.
Yeah.
It's
respond, not understand. Okay. So in this front desk role, we understand the value of probing and getting to the individual's goals, not listening to just respond with one of the 3 programs where we mostly start the new people in, but to really understand and then do the computations at the end to figure out where to put them. But if you pull out your frequently asked questions list,
Yeah.
it's going to put them in a box probably.
Yeah.
You're going to give them these canned responses that aren't really going to actually benefit the individual. They're just going to get to your bottom line.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think in those situations, I mean, it's good to have a common like understanding of what people are likely to say. But as soon as you start automatically responding with a set number of or a set guide of kind of answers,
Hmm.
I think it's going to be very difficult to get that person to say what it is that they need to say, because so many people come through those doors, and while they may have an overarching kind of general idea that's very similar to everybody else that walks through that door, they also might be there because of a domestic violence situation, but they don't want to come out
They're
and
not,
say
yeah.
that, I just met you, like I don't know you, this was already uncomfortable for me. So the odds of them just spouting that out are maybe not all that high. And so I have to understand how to ask the right questions to get to that point. And they might not ever say that, but I might be able to get to a point where I have an understanding of this might be why they are here. Just as an example, if I'm just reading off some checklist of things, I'm almost waiting to use my checklist as opposed to listening to what they're actually saying to me, because I'm thinking, okay, where does this fit into my, you know, 5 responses kind of thing. And I think as soon as you go down that hole, it's very difficult to actually be listening to what it is they're saying. And then the other side of it is too, like we might not just, and I know this is not good sales, but we might just not be a good fit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not automatically looking to put everybody in one of our boxes. Somebody comes in and like they've been competing and at high levels of jiu-jitsu for 10 years, and that's what they want to do. I'm going to be super honest with them and say, like, look, I feel good about our jiu-jitsu program, but it is more geared towards self-defense. It is more geared towards, real world kind of application. We don't do a big focus on competition. And so we might not be the right place for you.
We had this conversation, I feel like in Ohio most recently, where we were talking about how yes, what we do is for everyone, but not everyone should necessarily do it.
Yeah.
You gave the example of a jiu-jitsu person who's more focused on competing versus where we're more on the side of self-defense. And then the other kind of more self-defense side would be that there are certain people who aren't in a place yet to start getting hands-on with other people and going through that experience
Right.
of learning to defend themselves, because they have more on the mental, emotional side before they can get to the physical.
Right. And so, their first class, you're going to put them on their back and have somebody get between their legs, like
Yeah.
that
That can go.
If you don't, and that's why you have to understand why somebody is coming to, especially in our space, what we do, because almost everything is very up close and personal. Like we had a brand new student training class in jiu-jitsu last night. I didn't know this at the time, but she had trained before. She had trained for like a year. And so she had a good foundation, a good skill set. She did really well in the class, but I didn't know this at the time. And I was waiting for Riley to come partner with her. And so during the warm-up, we started pummeling, and I was immediately surprised because she knew how to pummel.
She could pummel? Wow. Even with training, that's not
Right.
common.
Exactly.
That's not walking the door ready.
But it's literally, I just introduced myself to you, to this brand new person off the street, and now we're like hugging each other.
Yeah.
So what we do is the niches of niches, and in order to create an environment that is comfortable for people, we do need to listen to make sure we're getting them in the right places, in the right spots. If we have that spot, if we don't have it, then you have to be honest about that as well, because ultimately everybody suffers. If you put somebody in a spot that you don't have a good faith belief is a good fit for them, it won't be good for them. It won't be good for you. It won't be good for their training partners. It'll be a bad experience all around. And then the ripple effect of that will be unknown to you.
Right.
Because they're going to leave there and they're going to say things to people that you're never going to know about or hear about. And all because you just didn't get enough information on the front end. You didn't listen.
Yeah, they're going to tell their friends and the people around them and probably hit Google and all sorts of things. And it wasn't a
and they should.
problem. Yeah, of course.
I mean, if it's a legitimate problem, and somebody asks them, hey, did you go try that class that you're talking about? And they're like, yeah, I did. And this is what happened. That's on us.
Yeah.
It's
so hard to remember once you know something, it's hard to remember what expectations somebody might be coming in with to help them reframe what that looks like. Kickboxing is the biggest example for me. People will come in and say they've done kickboxing, but they've only ever hit a heavy bag hanging from, around, or whatever. Or yeah. And even there, maybe did some work on mitts with a coach, but it wasn't structured towards fighting. It was just, a jab is, in our vernacular, a lead hand straight punch, but you could also call it an octopus. And like, if that's what you know it as, you throw it as that. And it's just language.
Yeah.
So, words don't mean anything until they do. I'm going to let you stick to the words.
But every gym has its own language.
Yeah. That's part of why we bring people in at a foundation program type level, because you need to, and people get annoyed and they're like, oh, but I've been training for years. Okay, but you haven't been training here for years. Right. You need to learn our language. We need to learn your language so that we can understand how to safely and effectively work together.
Yes.
And if you take one class and you're killer and you understand and we get you and like it looks great, sure, we'll move you up.
Right. But it's also not just about you, bro.
That part. Yeah.
Like I have an entire community here that I am responsible for.
Yes.
And I don't know you. And you can tell me you've done all these things, and maybe you have, and that's awesome. That's great. Congratulations. High five, fist bump, whatever. But you're going to have to show me, not just that you have a skill set, but that you can be a good training partner for the environment. That you can listen to our way of doing things, because end of the day, it just is what it is. I don't really care how you did it somewhere else. It doesn't really matter to me. That may be to your benefit. It may not be here, so the reason that we start everybody in a foundation class, it's not just about them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the mistake that lots of people make. They let their ego get the better of them. Oh, I've been training for 10 years. I'm not going to a beginner's class. Okay, well, then you're not training here.
Yeah. Well, and so that's even in a hierarchy type thing where there's a clear coach, leader, and then students, active listening still needs to be on both sides. The student in class, the person walking in, needs to be paying attention and work towards understanding what we're communicating as well. Yeah. I'm not saying you're a beginner, you're basic, you should do this class. I'm saying this is how we start. This is how we train safely, because eventually you might be part of this community and you're going to appreciate that we bring people in and vet them, for lack of a better word, to make sure that, again, we can keep people safe within our classes.
Yeah. To me, it's a very simple concept. However, people get in their own way a lot of times. This is all about ego.
Yeah.
It just is. And so, because we're talking about listening, a lot of times listening is thwarted by ego, because you've already created this narrative in your head and you're not hearing the rationale for why something is being done or said a certain way, because your ego is not allowing that to happen. All you hear is somebody telling you, well, you're going to go to a basic class because you don't know XYZ.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not hearing the real reasons for us doing that. And that, look, the normal person is going to be here 8 to 12 weeks. That might not be the case for you because you do have this experience.
Right.
But you're still going to start there.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned when you were talking about how we might not be the place for you, it not being good business sense. Mm-hmm. And we've said that a lot. And because we were just talking about the restaurant industry, and I just read that I was reading Daniel Coyle's book, The Talent Code, which is where a lot of these quotes come from. And I just made this connection. In the restaurant world, let's say somebody orders a steak and they get it and they don't really like it, and the waiter comes by and sees that they've eaten one bite and they're like, "Oh, is there something wrong with it? What's
Right.
wrong?" And they're like, just yeah, it just wasn't really tasting right, whatever it was, right? And they offer to remake it or give them something else, and they give them something else.
Yep.
And then there's a choice to be made. They technically purchase 2 entrees,
Right.
and you can box up the rest of that steak and send it home with them.
Right.
Or you realize and understand that that first experience wasn't the right fit for them.
Yep.
And you comp it off their tab.
Right.
And so that ties all the way back around to, okay, it's not a good business sense to give somebody food, to cook it correctly, to do all of the right things, and then not make them pay for it.
Yeah.
Short term. But it makes sense.
Yes.
And it's the right way to handle that situation.
Right.
And so now what there's a whole list of this process too, because that waiter has to understand either I'm going to make the decision to comp this because I have that power, or I need to go higher up and mention it to them because I recognize, this experience wasn't what they expected. Right. We went out to eat just a couple days ago. We went out to lunch and we both ordered a tofu dish, and it was different flavors or whatever. And the waiter brought out 2 of what I ordered. And he realized right away that it wasn't right. And you didn't want them to throw out the food or whatever, have to remake it. So you're like, no, it's fine. And I did think it was interesting that there was no, here's free edamame, something that costs them 20 cents on the dollar, whatever, or we comped that out or anything. And I don't care. It was fine. You could eat it, it's fine. But there's, it's interesting. I wonder if that waiter went to his manager and explained what happened, or if he didn't, or, like what happened behind the scenes, if anything.
Right. I think there's a few things at play in this circumstance. One, there's going to be a level of expectation based on the restaurant.
Yeah. We're not talking
if
Danny Meyer's restaurant.
If you're at Chili's versus, which we were not at Chili's, but if you were at Chili's versus you were at Danny Meyer's, there's going to be a different level of expectation on both sides of this equation. Right. 2, I didn't make a big deal out of it at all. Like literally, I was just like, no, this is fine. Probably if I had pushed the issue a little, it would have. I mean, he offered to take it back and get it,
of course,
and change it out.
We don't want to waste food just because and it's something that
it wasn't like it was something that I wouldn't need or didn't, So I think probably he's not empowered to just make that decision on the spot, other than to remake it because he recognized. I think he recognized immediately that he probably made a mistake. So he's probably not like.
Yeah. The other thing is, if he went to the manager and explained what happened, if he got in trouble, in the past, if he had done that, then he's less likely to go back to them.
Right. And that's
I feel like we've talked about that before.
That's a leadership thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's good or bad leadership. If he's done this 6 times, at some point, that there needs to be a consequence for that. But if somebody's afraid to tell you because they've seen somebody else make a mistake and you lost your mind, that's a problem.
Right.
That's not good leadership. I've been spending a lot of time on leadership lately, working on a different project. And it's this idea that you either have to be one extreme or the other. You have to be either hard and kind of
unapproachable
or you get to be human. and there's no both and it's always either or. And so this idea of either or versus both and has really struck a chord with me lately. I've spent a good bit of time on it, and that's what comes to mind. You talk about things like this. Like I think you can
make employees comfortable to talk to you without encouraging mistakes.
Right.
Both of those things can be true.
Yes. And I mean, there can be consequence without it being catastrophic. They
could have to give $1 that all gets donated to charity. Right. There's ways
there's
to
so many ways to handle stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I want to close this out. So where this episode started, And why, and I wrote our intro like immediately. I don't know, it came straight to my head and I was very excited. And then this episode took a bunch of twists and turns as I was doing the research on it, and it landed somewhere that I wasn't expecting. Is what it is, right?
Second plan A.
It started primarily with these short little cliches and sayings and aphorisms that people use that can be pretty terrible. And we hit a little bit on it when we did the slap a quote on it and call it growth episode. We hit some just terrible quotes, but sometimes they get worse when you try to make them not just a terrible quote, but a very short, terrible quote. Things like mindset is everything. I pulled that one straight from the book, his book.
Yeah, that's one, like, and it's crazy to me that trainers use that.
Yeah.
Well,
oh,
what
it's
do I
literally
need
a
you
shirt.
for, bro?
Mindset over everything.
Yeah, why do I need you then? Why do I
Yeah.
need your skills and your, like, what are we even doing here? If
Yeah.
I came in with the right mindset, whatever that means, and I don't even really know what that means. It's I heard Craig Douglas say this one time. Mindset is not a verb. You can't mindset your way out of a problem. I think having the right mindset, again, whatever that means, can definitely be a part of a solution, but it's not the solution.
Yeah.
It's a piece of it, but it's not something that I can, like, just mindset my way out of this problem. I can't mindset my way down a mountain with a broken leg.
Mindset your way out of bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I tell you what, let a 200-pound purple belt get you inside control, and his only job is to pin you there. And then let me see you mindset your way out of that.
Well, this goes into our next, this is the feel good lies category. Our next one, which is just, well, if you want it bad enough, obviously you'll just be able to escape. You just have to want it badly enough. Yeah. If you don't escape, you didn't want it bad enough.
Right.
If you don't win the game, the other team wanted it more than you.
Yeah.
That one drives me nuts.
Or they prayed harder.
Okay. Fight myths.
Because clearly God cares who won that basketball game.
That is what he's mostly prioritized. Fight myths. Size doesn't matter. Just going to hit that one right there. Adrenaline will carry you through.
Yeah. Adrenaline plus mindset.
That's everything you need right there.
Unstoppable. Juggernauts.
Get you through that gorilla.
Red. So stupid.
And then the one that kind of kicked it off for me, that's just been, I don't know why things just float around in my head sometimes, but this one's been floating there. And finally I was like, I need a cause. 2 is 1, 1 is none.
You're going to get me on another FMA panel.
I mean, a lot of industries use this. Medical, carrying a tourniquet, firearms, having a magazine. I don't know.
Listen,
Filipinos, 2 knives, 2 sticks.
I'm not a math person at all. Like, at all. But 2 is still 2. And 1 is still 1. Like, I understand what they're saying.
Yes.
Like, I get it.
Yes.
But it's stupid.
Yes.
Like, it's dumb. Like, it doesn't.
Yeah.
The idea that I need to carry 2 knives because 1 is somehow not enough, because I can't get to the one in my front waistband, so I carry one at 5 o'clock. And, like, what? No. Like, it's just more shit you have to think about and tie your hands up and like,
retain and not arm the other person with.
And that part. Like, I stop.
Or if it's more things to carry, if we're talking like tourniquets or something.
Yeah.
Now, if you have 3 kids and 1 tourniquet, 1 is 1.
Right.
But 3 is 3. And that's where all of this goes.
What am I going to carry? So I'm going to carry a pistol. Well, now I have to carry 2. So I put 1 on my ankle.
Yes, okay.
Now I need an extra mag for
both of them.
At least this one. And then I need 2 tourniquets, 2 knives. What else? Where do we draw the line? 2 chest seals? Like, what are we doing? Like, what all do I need here?
So that one in particular drew me down this rabbit hole of how do we go? Because, the idea with a short type of quote would be to simplify something down so well that you can use it to guide you in situations as principles, whatever it might be. And it's easier to memorize, but you can't lose the important parts of it.
Yeah.
Which a lot of these for sure do. all of them that we've said do. And I came across this quote from the book Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. And it's simplicity isn't about dumbing down, it's about prioritizing. And so what a lot of these quick little quotes do is prioritize the wrong thing.
Yeah, because in some cases it makes people, well, one, it makes people feel good somehow.
Yep.
You know,
feel good lies.
Yeah, it reads good on a t-shirt. You know.
Yeah.
It's a thing I can throw out at a seminar or a workshop or whatever, and be like, oh
yeah, that feels that motivates me.
That makes sense.
I'm inspired.
Like,
yeah.
I've been carrying one knife my whole life. Wow.
I've never had to use it, but I really need to.
Like, I've never had a knife in my life. Like, what?
I love that you're running with the knife side of this.
Well, that's what immediately comes to my mind when I hear somebody say 2 is 1, 1 is none.
I get it. So true simplicity, just a concise concept backed by experience, is separate from lazy simplicity, which is where you get these catchy phrases that avoid the deeper work, the deeper side of whatever you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because if you can't make the appropriate decisions about when to draw your knife and when to use it and how to retain it and how to best utilize it without arming the other person,
right.
Well, that's a really long quote to say right there.
Yeah.
But we could just go with 2 is 1, 1 is none.
If that's true,
2 is also none.
Having 2 is also 0.
There you go. So 1 is none, 2 is none.
It's like the gorilla thing. It's not a numbers game.
Yeah.
It's not about the number.
That's exactly what it is.
It's about the understanding. It's about the totality of the circumstance. If all those things you just said are true of one knife, they are true of 10 knives.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. If this resonated with you, share a story with us.
You might be insane.
Share some of your biggest pet peeve cliches for us. We'd love to hear them.
Please don't.
Oh, no, I want to hear them.
Send them to her. I don't want them.
They could be about life or on the mats or something. Just whatever drives you crazy.
I don't want them.
I'm here for it. That's our look at active listening in action. If you enjoyed this discussion, leave us 5 stars, especially on Spotify. You guys, we've only got 21 there. We're at a 4.8. If you think we're better than a 4.8, drop in.
Who gave us less than a 5?
I know, right?
We
cannot. So
that's garbage.
But if you,
also,
listener, right now, why are you bothering? Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, I'd love to boost those numbers up a little bit. Because I'm a numbers person.
21 people.
Yeah, we have 100-something followers, but only 21 of you guys have hit that star button. You don't even have to leave a review on Spotify. You literally just click the stars.
I don't understand.
Think about it.
I have like 14,000 followers on Facebook.
we need to reach out to them better.
On Instagram. What is wrong with you people?
Can we break into the 3 digits? That'd be great. Anyway, follow, share, subscribe. You know the drill. If you didn't enjoy this podcast, stay off of the star rating, but otherwise over comment, overreact, share this with everyone, talk about how much it's terrible. And yeah, thanks for listening to Second Plan A. We look forward to growing with you next time.
Thanks, everybody.